What's up, gamers? This is Battle Mallet Podcast, episode 47, XED, Gnarlwood Rivals Review, Grinkrak's Looncourt, and the Fearsome Fortress. We have got to figure out how to shorten those titles. For anyone that isn't familiar, the Battle Mallet Podcast is the journey of three busy gamers playing games that they love, balancing life with those games, and attending the Nova Open Convention every year. My name is Jerod Johnson, and tonight I am joined by Trace Hyde.
I'm going loony.
And Jason Table Noob Murray.
I'm on a quest to figure this out.
Nice. Well, I'm just going to huddle in my fortress away from you questing loons. So tonight's episode, the bulk of the material will be reviewing Grinkrak's Looncourt and the Fearsome Fortress Rivals deck in our standard Rivals review format. We're going to dip into some Nemesis content as well. And then we'll close out the show. So, but before we get into any of that, I think it's important that we talk about what everybody's been up to. So, Trace?
So been playing a few games of Underworlds. Tested out some fun decks with the old, the Gore Chosen of Drom. Trying out a kind of a domain heavy plink damage centric kind of deck. It's had mixed results so far. It's been something a little different than my traditional way of playing, which is more straightforward, in your face, just roll a lot of dice and then roll a bunch of misses. That's what usually happens with me. So, trying to transition away from that and just play a little more heady game. But it's been fun. I've enjoyed it. I've played 3 games now with that deck, I believe. Played against Jerod and the Sons of Velmorn in a retooled game because Jason talked him into playing a different Rivals deck to pair with them, and they turned out to be a lot better with that deck than the other one. And then I played against Jason the other night in our normal meetup time with the Hexbane's Hunters, which was pretty gross because he rolled a lot of hits and people died and stuff. So
I was hot. It was hot. Hot dice.
The dice were hot that night.
Hunter's gonna hunt, man.
Yeah, it was a bloody game. But so that's what I've been up to. And as far as playing, I've picked up a couple boxes of MCP, the game that we shall not talk about.
We're going to talk about it. It's fine.
And then, so I picked up Blob and Pyro, and then I have plans to pick up the Wolverine and Sabretooth box at some point. I think I'm gonna put Wolverine in my Midnight Suns list that I am cooking up.
Oh, fun!
Nice.
And then I started painting the Looncourt, and also
Zarbag's Gits.
And the name escaped me briefly, but I figured if I'm going to paint some goblins, I might as well paint all the goblins so they at least match one another. So started working on that this week. But yeah, it's been pretty steady little hobby trickle.
Like it.
And I mean, playing those Nemesis games with Drom, I think the last game, like you kind of like got the token management piece down, right? Because you're getting all the additional tokens and having to manage the Inspire and all their abilities, although it did not go well. But you did take out like 2 dogs instantly, which like really hurt my feelings. Like all my support for the entire game was wrong, so I just had to roll all those crits.
Yeah. I took 2 dogs to the pound and 1 activation, so that was fun. And then there was something else that happened. If I had lived through your last attack was it Bridget that did it?
No, it was Hexbane himself.
It was Hexbane. I would have scored
and I had to roll
5 glory at the end of the game.
Yeah.
So
because I needed the Grievous for anything to work, and I ended up by rolling the crit. So
yep, if you hadn't rolled the crit, I would have scored like 5 glory that round, which would have been awesome.
But then on the other table
alas.
was Eddie against Jake, and they're going at it. We want to talk about crits. There was a double crit hit on 2 dice, and then there was a double crit defense in the same thing to defend it. It was great.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So good.
So that's what I've been up to. Jason, what about you, bud?
Yeah, I mean, just to continue on, got a game in with Hexbane, with Tooth and Claw from a Nemesis standpoint. Actually, like the first time that I got to play with my painted models with Hexbane, I've always brought them with us, but they never made it to the table. So it was a lot of fun to get that. And the couple things that I learned, I got to make a few tweaks to that deck that's posted on the website. So like maybe take out an objective or two, where I think it's one where you have to have 3 hunters or 3 fighters in enemy territory. And it's great early game, but not great late game. So I'll try to look for something better there to make some tweaks to that deck. Still been playing and dabbling in my Shadeborn and Daring Delvers. I absolutely love that deck. I like Nemesis in Gnarlwood season has been so much fun for the Shadeborn for me. Really thinking through. I play a place objectives or place feature tokens style of build with a lot of attacks. There is another build in there for plink damage, which I do think also works pretty well. But my build, again, has been updated on the website, and it's so much fun. I am a little concerned on Fearsome Fortress coming out because I do think my deck takes a hit. And, just a little spoiler alert, I did not rework them in Fearsome Fortress, and I do think that there is some play with them where they could use Fearsome Fortress as a Nemesis deck, but I'm still going to stick with my Daring Delvers. And then last but not least, in my playing frenzy, I've been playing Daring Delvers and Eyes of the Nine and winning, because that is what you do, is you play Eyes of the Nine and win. This is brought back so much joy in some older warbands, and just finding little tricks and intricacies out in the decks. And Daring Delvers and Eyes of the Nine, let's face it, it's really just Eyes of the Nine with Daring Delvers, but there's I think 7 cards of the whole thing, of the objectives and power deck, the whole thing from Eyes of the Nine. But they just play so well in there. You get to, do some good old Vortimus tricks. I just
horror tricks, all the fun stuff.
Make the horror an explorer.
Yeah.
He's an explorer horror.
Yep. He's
And you either deal with him, and then the rest of my warband just keeps working their way up and scoring the objectives, or you don't deal with him, and then he's an explorer horror in your backfield shooting you for some damage. So it's I've really enjoyed it. The other thing too is when we've been playing just straight Rivals, because we do have a couple new players that have come out. I really like just to play Magor's Fiends and Tooth and Claw. I got beat up pretty bad by Osiarch Bone Reapers in a game where I thought I had it won, and the Osiarch Bone Reapers and Rivals came back and won in the third phase. But it's just really cool to get in there, and it truly is a board game. I saw it on the back of the package for Fearsome Fortress, open shuffle play, and it truly is. And the fact that I have 50 freaking war bands or whatever the heck it is to pick from, I just love it. Just playing games. I think on the other front, from a hobby, and this is to note, a couple episodes ago, it might have been last episode, I said that I was going to cut down on my purchases. I did buy Looncourt and I did buy Fearsome Fortress, but I've no Blob and Pyro, no Weapon X, no Sentinels. I've stayed true, and to the point where I took Emma to buy Looncourt, and she's like, "Daddy, I thought you weren't going to buy any models because you were going to save to go back to Disney." And I was like, "Shut your mouth, kid."
This is the one exception, Emma.
It is the one exception, and she is aware. She was just, giving me a hard time, like I've taught her to. But yeah, other than that, a lot of travel for me. So balancing life and games, we haven't recorded. basically because I was gone and somebody else was sleeping. But traveled for work a couple times. It's been a bit crazy. And now we're into the holidays, so we'll travel again. Just nutty stuff.
Loony stuff.
All the loons.
Yep.
Jerod?
Yeah, so I mean, just echoing, playing lots of Underworlds, getting games in with the Canaan's Reapers, which has been fun, and then just trying to run the gambit. That's not the word I'm looking for.
Gamut.
Yeah, that's the one. Running the gamut with Sons of Elmore. So started off with Tooth and Claw because I think from the get-go, they look like they want to be aggro. But after some coaching from Coach Jason, decided that Sons of Elmore really want to be and sink into that counterpunch. And so I have been working on a deck that uses Daring Delvers to kind of lean into that counterpunch where, I'm able to score things by staying in or close to my own territory, forcing you to come to my fighters. It certainly does not hurt when old Jedrin goes in and bops.
We're not talking about it right now. Now, how did that happen though? What happened to make that happen is I used Drom in the first round to pull you in thinking, oh, he's got a 2-sword attack. It'll be fine. Yep. And then you just pop the shit out of the Gore Hulk. It was not.
Who was standing
it went
precariously next to a lethal hex. So the next thing you knew, the Gore Hulk had one wound remaining.
Yeah, I might have been trying to score,
have some wound counters on you.
Have some wound counters, and then I might have been trying to score some shenanigans with a 2 glory objective for killing you with a ploy or a lethal hex. So,
yeah. But it's been fun, and like I'm with Jason. Like it feels like it's breathing new life into the game, and it makes it easy to just pick up a warband and play. I think that there will always be a part of me that will miss the brain-racking, time-consuming thought that goes into building a championship deck. But when it comes to inviting new players to play, I don't miss that at all.
Yep.
So basically have done nothing on the hobby side other than make purchases because my almost 2-year-old has decided that sleep is for the weak. And so that means that I am not getting sleep and my wife is not getting sleep. And so I think for the past 3 weeks, I have been awake past 10 o'clock twice. So
yeah,
I guess three times if you count us recording right now.
So what you're saying is you're weak.
I am. No, apparently I'm not weak because I guess I am weak because I am trying to get sleep. But yeah, so it has been a minor hindrance in any late night hobbying, which used to be my time to do that, but it will be, it'll phase out. We hope. The other two decided to start sleeping at some point because they do it now. So I don't know when that'll happen, but I don't know. Who knows? 3 years from now, maybe I'll be able to hobby again. Yeah.
I will say, just to kind of touch on a point that you both made, which was the whole open shuffle play. I definitely leaned into that in our last meetup too, because I picked up a warband that I've not played in a couple of years in the Wormspat and put Deadly Depths with it. Just being like, yeah, let's try this out. And had a ton of fun playing against Jake and his vampires. So that was a fun game for us too.
Yeah, Deadly Depths. I mean, your deck has not changed. You still only have 3 surges. So
yep,
just like the Wormspat.
Yep.
That was really encouraging too, to walk into a local shop the other day and see Brian, Jake, and another person just on a random day playing Underworlds.
Yeah. It has
It's
been
awesome.
years since that has happened.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Good. I'm glad. Well, cool. Well, why don't we take a break here? And when we come back, we will talk about Grinkrak the Great and his royal court of Gloomspite Gits.
Welcome back to the looniest of the segments that we'll ever do in a long time. So we are going to talk through Grinkrak's Looncourt. I guess we'll start off with the fighters themselves, and kind of delve into those a little bit. So the first fighter that we're going to talk about is Grinkrak himself. Grinkrak the Great. Grinkrak is a 3-move, 2-block, 3-wound fighter, and he has his moon slicer. It's a moon slicer.
Oh, he can slice my moon anytime.
Hi-yo.
Moon. And it's range 1, 2 hammers, and 2 damage. His inspire condition is 3 or more other surviving friendly fighters are inspired, which we will get to in a minute because they have a fun inspire mechanic for the rest of the fighters. He also has an extra action on his card, which is a reaction called Dub. Use this after you score a non-quest objective. Choose one other surviving friendly fighter, inspire that chosen fighter. So the quest mechanic is a cool mechanic that we'll get to on these other cards, which is their inspire mechanics for the rest of the fighters are you score this fighter's quest objective. The quest objectives are a fun little thing that we've added in this particular deck that you can assign like a power card to each fighter. So each fighter can be given a quest to go on. You are a noble knight on a quest, and you're trying to fulfill your vow and stomp your enemies and scrag them and stab them and mob them. So
are Gits like noble? Are these noble Gits?
Well, they think they are.
So I'm going to interject, and I forgot to mention this in the intro. So I'm going to throw some recommended reading out to our listeners. If you want an idea of the flavor of the Looncourt is, and that would be to read Git Slayer, which is one of the Gotrek in the Mortal Realms books, because some of the chapters are from the perspective of some Gloomspite Gits and a Gabapalooza. But it kind of gives a perspective on, how they think, what they're thinking about their Loon King and gaining glory for themselves. So if you haven't read it, check it out. It'll help you get into the mindset of these wandering heroes of the gloom.
Wait, so they think they're knights for real?
True story.
Yeah, like not in a diluted flesh eater courts kind of way, but there's like a king and a knight and
yeah.
There's, speaking, and there is one Git that speaks in like these and thous and dust and like thou dost protest.
Wow.
It's really funny.
Is his name Van Lichtenstein?
It is not Van Lichtenstein.
Oh, damn.
I know. Anyway,
so for these questing goblins, let's get into the text of exactly what it says on some of these quest cards. It's kind of long. So it says, a lot of these quests have objectives have the quest keyword on them. It says you can give this to a friendly fighter that has no tokens, which is important, or quests in the power step in place of playing a card. You do not draw a replacement. So that even if it's a surge, you don't just draw into your hand. If this fighter is taken out of action, add this card to your hand. So if you lose the fighter that you put the quest on, you can put it back in your hand, no harm, no foul. And then it has the criteria for the quest itself, which we'll get into shortly on some of the ones that we like. But basically, the cool thing is you can play it like a power card. So you play this in your power step. You can basically telegraph what you're trying to do to your opponent And if you pull it off, you can inspire your fighter.
And
so the rest
and score it.
And you score the objective. So it's kind of a twofold thing.
And I think the other just point of clarification here, because it gets a little bit wonky with the quests, is like in brackets says even if you have 3 or more objective cards. So the way it's going to work is like you start off with 3 objective cards, right? You put the quests out that you want. You do not draw more cards at that point. But when you get to the end phase, the rules state if you don't have 3 objective cards in your hand, you draw 3 objective cards. So you could have 3 quests out at the end phase, draw up 3, and then go into the next round and one of your fighters dies. And then that quest card will come back into your hand and you'll have 4.
Yep.
Now you may get to the end phase again and you have 4 in your hand. Like you don't get to draw more, but it is cool that they don't punish you for putting these cards out.
Yeah, it's not just lost, which is nice, especially the way that they've got the way they've got it formatted. So that keeping that in mind, the rest of these fighters all have that same inspire mechanic. So if you score their quest, if you assign them a quest and they score it, they then inspire. The next fighter we're going to talk about is Grib the Wonky Lance. Or do we want to talk about Grinkrak's inspired side? Let's do that real quick. So the only thing that changes on Grinkrak is he goes to 3 hammers instead of 2 hammers. So not much change there. Next fighter is Grib the Wonky Lance. He is the noble knight on his squig steed. It's one of the coolest models in the warband, in my opinion. He is move 4, 1 shield, and 3 wounds. He has his Wonky Lance, which is range 2, 2 fury, and 2 damage, and it has knockback 1. And then he also has the Squig Horn, which is range 1, 2 hammers or 2 smash and 2 damage, and it also has a nifty little impact there, which is something we've seen on a couple of different fighters across the game, which is +1 damage when this fighter makes during a charge action. So he goes to 3 damage when he makes a charge with the Squig Horn. On his inspired side, he goes to 5 move, 2 dodge, and then he gains his attack characteristic goes up 1 to 3 for his Wonky Lance, and also the Squig Horn goes up to 3 for smash for his second attack. So he gets pretty accurate on his inspired side. Next fighter is Poke and Snark. 3 hex movement, 1 shield defense, and 3 wounds. That's a trend in this warband. Nothing is above 3 wounds. And he has his Squig Spear. The Squig Spear has a fun little mechanic on it that we'll get into in just a second, which is he has 1 range, 2 fury, 2 damage, and it has the Gnashing keyword. Gnashing is, on a crit, it has Gnashing. Break one of the target's upgrades. That's big. That's real big.
Yeah, I just love it. We've seen the mechanic before in Championship with certain cards or certain upgrades will allow you to kind of break an upgrade. The fact that this is just like baked into 2 fighters in this warband is I can't wait to have it go off. Like it's nothing I'm going to hedge my bets on. It's like, oh, if I come in here, I'm going to just break this upgrade, but it's going to be super cool when it happens.
Absolutely.
Well,
so Snark go ahead, Jerod.
The flavor of it, I was going to say, is really cool because, so Poke and Snark, he literally has a squig tied to the end of a spear. Like, that's his weapon. It's not like he's breaking your weapon with his spear. Like, he is stabbing you with a squig, and the squig is gnashing up your upgrade. I love it. Like, just the theme of it is awesome.
Yeah, the theater, the mind of it all. Yeah. And on his inspired side, he goes to 4 move, stays at 1 block, still 3 health. And then his spear gains accuracy to 3 fury. So more likely to get that gnashing proc off. The next fighter is Snorbo de Spore. This is the trumpeter of the warband with his trumpet that is made out of a mushroom. He is 3 hex movement, 1 shield defense, and 2 wounds. His Spore Trumpet is range 3, 3 fury, 1 damage, but it has stagger baked in, which is nice. On his inspired side, he stays the same movement and defense characteristics and wounds, but his Spore Trumpet gains cleave in addition. So he becomes a little more accurate against those shield defense fighters. Probably another one of the highlights of the warband is the next fighter we're going to talk about, which is Skulko and Pronk. This is a pair of goblins hiding behind a shield, slingshotting squigs at the opponent, which is amazing. They have 2 hex movement, so they're super slow, 1 defense of a shield, 3 wounds, and then they have their Squigapult attack. It's range 3, 2 fury, 2 damage, but it has the steady keyword and the gnashing keyword. So gnashing is the shared keyword with Snark, but they gain the steady one, which is this fighter can only make this range attack once per phase, and it has +1 range if this fighter has no move and or charge tokens. So this is your park and bark fighter. If you can get him somewhere that he's got decent reach on the board, he can kind of touch anything. On their inspired side, they go to 2 defense of shields, which is great. And then they gain 1 die on their Squigapult attack, and they keep all the same special conditions on their attack. And then the last 2 are your what we affectionately refer to as the Dangle Bros of the warband. Moonface Nags. He has 3 hex movement, 1 shield defense, 2 health, and he has his Humble Stabba, range 1, 2 fury, 1 damage. On his inspired side, he goes to 2 dodge, and he gains a attack die on his fury attack. And then lastly, but not leastly, is Pointy Burke. Pointy Burke has range 3, or has 3 hex movement, 1 shield defense, 2 health, and he has a sticka. It's basically a piece of metal bolted to a stick because he's lost his squig. He's a noble knight that has now been removed of his steed. So he's got 1 hex range, 2 fury, and 1 damage. And then on his inspired side, he goes to 2 dodge and gains 1 damage on his sticka. So it's a pretty diverse little warband there to kind of talk through. You guys have any other additional commentary you'd like to make about the fighter cards before we move on to our favorite objectives, ploys, and upgrades?
I really like the art for Skulko and Pronk.
I mean, that's fair.
Definitely fighting against that squig to try to launch it against their opponents.
I just love the heavy theme. The theme is really awesome in the warband. Like they all just look the part of goblin nobility.
Yeah. I think the models are there's a lot of character in all the models, which we really haven't seen. Like a lot of the little gits that have appeared in different warbands are just that. They're just little gits. Like each one of these feels like there's a story to be had. I also think that it's interesting that it's a 7-fighter warband with no built-in additional movement. So that's like the first time that we kind of seen that with whether it's Gits or another large fighter warband. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of play out, which we can get to as we get into the objectives.
Yep. So we're going to do our normal format of this. So we'll pick what we ideally would like in our hand in the first round of a game of Rivals with these fellas. So, Jerod, why don't you go first and tell us what your first pick for the objectives would be if you had 3 in your hand?
I think, and this one comes with some caveats, but we probably want Mob 'em earlier rather than later. So Mob 'em, this is a surge, it's a quest. So it has all of the quest language that we discussed before. You can give it to a friendly fighter. It's score this immediately after a supported friendly fighter's successful attack action if this fighter made that attack action or supported that fighter. So you've got some flexibility in how you score it. This fighter can either make the attack action or support the attack action, but it requires some setup. So there are some pushes that we'll talk about later. You could, risk it for the biscuit and just move a fighter next to an enemy fighter and just hope that you don't get murdered. But it's probably going to be harder to score later if your goblins are dying.
This is true.
Having it in hand earlier, with the caveat that you're looking to get some key push cards in your hand as well. But
or somebody tried to come in to murk one of your guys and missed.
That's true.
And then it's a target of opportunity. I think the key thing here, and the reason we like it turn one, in addition to you have 7 fighters on turn 1, is it doesn't have to be a successful attack action.
Nope. Just has to be an attack.
It does.
No, it does have to be successful. Yep.
It does, but if you're supporting or being supported, it increases your chances of
that happening.
Which
it's a pretty good odds that it'll go through, and it doesn't have to take them out of action. That's what I meant to say. It just has to be a successful attack action. So.
Yep.
Just got to get by those defenses. So with that being said, Jason, what is your top pick for?
I think that the best objective in here is run them down. Like, this game requires charging, it requires attacking, and now I'm going to give one of these wonderful lads an objective that score this immediately after this fighter's successful attack action made as part of a charge action. The only thing that stinks here is that it's like a one-shot type thing. Like, I'm going to put it on there, I'm going to charge, and I hope that attack is successful, but I'm probably attacking anyway, and it'd be great if I can score a glory out of it and inspire a fighter. Obviously, this is probably the one that you put on Grib to charge him in and do some work with that squig horn. Mm-hmm. But, maybe you need to get one of your ranged fighters inspired as well. So I really like that one. That is my pick for hand 1, turn 1.
I like it. I'm going to go with the first end phase objective of the ones that we're mentioning, which is Looncourt Fearsome. And this says, score this in an end phase if this fighter is adjacent to 2 or more fighters and 1 or more of those fighters is a friendly fighter. You got 7 fighters in this warband. This is a 1 movement score. You can, because it doesn't say you have to be adjacent to an enemy. Just says you have to be adjacent to at least 1 friendly. So you can just nestle a person right in between 2 other fighters, especially since you're not moving everybody, since we don't have any built-in movement shenanigans. So a couple of fighters are probably going to be sitting stationary. So you can just nestle those goblins right up next to each other and score a glory at the end phase. So it's nice and easy. Doesn't require any dice rolls. Just requires some fighters to be close enough for you to tuck in between them.
Yeah, and refresh my memory, but you went over dub. Did we talk about dub in the end phase?
We didn't talk about it in the end phase, but dub, the reaction on Grinkrak's fighter card, only works during the turn. It doesn't work in the end phase, so you can't react to an end phase objective. So for those who are thinking, oh, I could put this objective in here and then dub my fighter in the end phase, you can't do that because there's no reaction step during the actual scoring phase.
And that's where that Looncourt Fearsome is really good, is because you're inspiring, in the end phase. So.
Correct. Yep. So that's the first. That's our objectives for this warband. Now let's talk about some ploys, gentlemen. Jason, why don't you go first this time? Tell us a ploy that you like for this warband in your first hand.
So they have a set of 3 gambits ploys that start with the word Giddish. I would like to see Giddish Resilience. And the cool thing about these Giddishes is like choose 1 friendly fighter that has a quest card, right? So all 3 of them are going to kind of have that wording that this is a ploy that enhances a fighter that has a quest card. This one in particular, Giddish Resilience, is +1 defense to that fighter, And then the other key to these is this effect persists until the end of the phase or until you score that card. So there's a lot of +1 defense dice out there. There's a +1 dice. There's, plus move. But most of them are just for one activation. These are really cool if they're part of the quest card that you get that benefit all the way through the round or until you score the quest. So I really, really like this. The +1 defense can help me score mob 'em. It can help me score some other things that I have to, be adjacent to or sit in enemy territory. And the fact that my leader is already 2 block to start, maybe I get him across and give him a quest. Not that he's going to score it, but, I could give him +1 resilient. So, he'll score the quest. He just won't inspire off of it. So,
correct.
But it'd be really cool to give him, 3 block, or you get it onto Grib and then he's on 3 dodge, or it just, there's a lot of play in it. I really like the additional defense.
Yeah, I agree. Jerod, what about you?
Well, we love pushes. So I'm going to pick Bold Pylon. And this is choose up to 2 friendly fighters, push each chosen fighter up to 2 hexes so that they are adjacent to the same enemy fighter. So we spoke before about the Mob'em objective where you needed those supports. This is a really good way to make that happen. And with 7 fighters and 3 ranged attackers, there's a really good chance that you're going to have 2 fighters within 2 hexes of the same enemy fighter.
But if it says up to, I could just choose 1.
You could choose 1. Yep.
So
this also is a cheeky little way to score Looncourt Scragum right at the end of the round.
That's true.
Yep. So you were going to say something else, Jerod?
I was going to just ask you what the last one was.
Well, I was going to tell you. So that's
Sweet.
Convenient. So we all know that I'm the one who likes to run in and attack stuff in this group. So I am going to go with stab, stab, and stab again. Reaction. Use this after a friendly fighter's activation in which they made 1 or more failed attack actions. That fighter makes 1 attack action. So you go in, you fail your thing, you now get to make an attack action. However, this does not score something that is made as part of a charge action, so you cannot use this to score run them down.
Sad.
It is sad. I wish that it worked that way, but it does not. So because you're making an additional action, it makes you make an attack action, and then it's after the friendly fighter's activation. So you've already done your charge. The whole action resolves, and then you play this. So, but getting a free attack action if you failed is nice. So,
especially on 2 Fury.
Correct. Yes. Or you just be Jedrin and dome somebody.
Listen, we all know that the 2 Fury 3 damage attack is the scariest attack in the game because it shouldn't hit. But you're afraid of it. I hate the Widow Katha.
Yep.
For that reason.
She's super scary.
People hate Gristlewell for that reason.
All right. So we're moving on to upgrades. I'll go first this time, I guess. Let's see. I really think we should talk about fortifying fungus. That's what I think we should talk about.
There's
Sounds
a fungus
like a great
among
name.
us.
It is fortifying. When this fighter is dealt damage, reduce that damage by 1 to a minimum of 1. These are always real good, especially when you have 3 wound fighters and 2 wound fighters. That suddenly turns that 2 damage attack into a you need to attack me twice attack, which is great. Not that I think that you'd put this on any of the 2 wound fighters in this warband, but if you needed to in a pinch, you could. So that is my pick. It's easy, straight to the point, do less damage.
Yeah.
Jerod, why don't you go next?
Yeah. So we already talked about pushes. We got to pick the other favorite, the +1 damage card. So I want some extra pointy boots. +1 damage to this fighter's range 1 attack actions. This is great for Gib. because then the Squighorn can now go to 4 damage on a charge, which is pretty sweet. And then you have other fighters that are going to go to 3 damage or 2 damage with some additional accuracy. I really dig the flavor card as a dad and a former teacher. I love me a good play on words. These extra pointy boots are useful when you want to make a point.
It's true. It's true. Let's not gloss over though that if you put this on Grib, he now has a range 2, 3 fury, 3 damage attack with knockback 1. Like
range 1 attacks only.
Oh, it is range 1 attacks. Sorry.
Yeah.
Ignore me. I got excited.
Grib's.
It is for the horn.
Squig's horn? Is Grib the squig or is Grib the get?
Grib is the goblin. Fairly certain.
Well, I mean, whatever. Not that we're going to pick this card in our top 3, but you talk about getting range 2, range 3 additional damage. They do have a card to do that. The Cunning Knight is +1 damage to this fighter's attack actions while this fighter has one or more supporting fighter. We talked about Bold Pylon, and we'll talk about my card here in a second, which is Downtrodden Square. That card there can also add damage, and it can add damage at range. So that one is very good too. But like I said, my third and bestest card for the upgrades is the Downtrodden Squire, and this is a reaction after this fighter's move action. Choose one friendly fighter that was adjacent to this fighter at the start of that action. Push that fighter by the shortest distance so that it is adjacent to this fighter. So if I do have that additional damage for supporting on my fighter, I can get this. The only caveat here is in that the player really has to be conscious of, it says push that fighter by the shortest distance so that is adjacent to this fighter. So if you charge and let's say the move 3, you can only get to your enemy, and the fighter, the shortest distance is the hex behind you. So if it's 2 hexes to get to you, they're not going to be in support. So you might actually have to go to a side or get behind to drag that square to get into support with the fighter that you wanted to. But I think that, the picture is the best thing here where you put it on Grib. He does have 4 move. Maybe you have Giddish Clarity put on it, which is +2 move to that fighter. Now you're moving 6. The rest of the guys are moving 5. You
could also have Magnificent Bounda on as well for +1 move and flying on Grib.
Yeah. So you could definitely make this card work to get somebody into support, to score objectives, maybe to get more damage. It is a really good combination card, and I want it. I want it right away.
It's a good card. I like them all. All right, so talk through all the different card combinations that we might want to see. So let's talk about what board you might want to use.
So I'm going to throw something out kind of that we haven't thrown out there before when it comes to board selection. This warband has 3 cards where they want to hold objectives. In particularly, they want to hold objective 1, 2, and 3. Right? So, and it's a 7-fighter warband. So you're probably not going to go first. You probably don't have a lot of choices where you're deploying your fighters because you're going to use every starting hex that's on the board.
True.
I am going to, if I have choice, I may just pick objectives and place the first board. Because I want to place 3 objectives so I kind of know where it is. I don't know. I just want the objectives. So if I'm doing that, then I'm either going to pick the Stricken Swamp because no matter what way they deploy, I feel like I have at least 2 fighters that can kind of get into enemy territory. Because that's the other thing, by mid to late game, you want to make sure that you have fighters in enemy territory. So you don't want something that's completely defensive deployment or Hall of Sublimation. would be my other kind of lead board. You know, I love to place engagement just as I'm sure as everybody else does, but I want the objectives with this warband because I want to be aggressive and I want to land on objectives.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I like it.
Jerod, what about play style? How are we playing with these fellas?
Yeah, so Jason kind of keyed into it. I mean, they're very aggressive. You know, I mean, they're all knights and squires and things on quests, and most of those quests have to do with attacking and killing. But they do have, fascinatingly enough, some hold objectives. So you want to keep that in mind. So they're flex probably 70% aggro, 30% hold, maybe 80-20. But the one thing that we noted in the pre-show is that they're going to be really reliant on their gambits and upgrades. So a lot of times you can kind of pick the playstyle based on the stat cards of the fighter. You can have a good idea of how successful a warband is going to be based on the stats of the fighter. And at first go, this warband doesn't look like it's going to be very successful. So their uninspired attacks are not as accurate. They're not doing as much damage. But by the time you apply gambits intelligently and put upgrades on the right fighters, now you're looking at a warband that actually has a lot of teeth behind it. So it's just note that you're probably going to have ups and downs, and how well your game goes, especially in the Rivals format, is going to be largely dependent on how your gambits and upgrades come out. The other thing that you're probably going to have to think about is deciding whether to score your quests or use them to inspire more fighters. So there are key fighters that you definitely want to get inspired. Grib, Dewalking Lance, you want inspired. You probably want Poke and Snark inspired, since he, gets more accurate. You probably want Skulko and Pronk inspired, because now you've got a range 3 or 4, 3 Fury, 2 damage attack. And then after that, it's not really that critical. So you may opt to just continue throwing quests under other fighters, the same fighters that are already inspired, but you may not. And then something that came up that we didn't really think about until very late in the pre-show was the fact that you may be able to just sacrifice Grinkrak himself. If you're not going to be able to inspire him by getting 3 fighters inspired, you're not getting to use the dub reaction in the end phase. He might be a viable missile, in late action phase 1 or early action phase 2.
And as far as goblin resilience goes, he's the pinnacle.
That's true. I mean, 2 block is nothing to sneeze at.
I mean, two block with 3 wounds, it's not ideal. You're not talking about Steelheart or something like that, but at the same time, he's still 2 block. And there's a couple. I think there's a upgrade in here to give +1 wound too, if I recall.
Yeah,
correctly.
there is. Yeah. Yep.
So, well, cool. So, rating. I think we said we were going to give these guys a silver, right? Well, playing into them, you want to do whatever you always want to do with a 7 fighter warband and just farm that glory.
Yep.
Farm that glory. So there's lots of opportunities to single shot fighters in this warband.
And the quests are telegraphed. So
correct. Yep.
Kind of play against them.
Yep. I think this is going to be a very, I think Jason said in the pre-show that this warband has a high ceiling, but we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. It's going to depend on, pilot skill and, just getting reps with the warband and getting better with them. So they actually have a pretty potent Rivals deck as far as total glory too. It's 17 as the baseline for their glory count. So if you can get them rolling, they can score a lot of glory for you. But I think silver, just based on the durability of the fighters, the number of the fighters. There's a lot going on as far as like the quests and stuff too. So,
Yep.
But excellent ploys, excellent upgrades. Lots of things to like. And with that, I think we'll take a break and we will come back and talk about
talk about Nemesis.
Oh, yes, we will talk about Nemesis, something we're not used to doing. So let's talk about Nemesis. I think that since we touched on the flex nature of this warband, in addition to like the fact that they're kind of aggro too, there's lots of options for you. So, Jason, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been thinking about with these guys as far as like your Nemesis deck?
Yeah, so I think that Nemesis is really where they can shine. Jerod kind of, both you brought it up when talking about the silver rating, is when you first look at this warband, you look at the fighter stats, you look at the objectives, and you immediately gravitate to so-so, right? And then you get to the gambits and upgrades, and you're like, this is where the meat and potatoes are of the warband. So what I wanted to do was really kind of leverage dub. So I think that there's like 4 really easy-ish scores on the surges for Looncourt. One of them might be being greedy, is like I put pick on a get your own size, because it is a 2 glory score. But I went for like 2 easier kind of surges, and I went with Fearsome Fortress, because it leverages that mid-board kind of passive aggro or counter aggro, so I'm still getting to the other side. And I put in bold sortie and impregnable defenses, because there's already one objective in the deck for a missed failed attack action against me, so why not make it 2? And then I really like kind of try to soften the end phase scoring by making stuff a little bit easier with stockpile and underground fortresses, which do similar things to stuff that their deck wanted to do anyway. And then I think Conquered Domain is just, it really could be like kind of the piece on top. So like I went down in total glory from a Nemesis standpoint, but Conquered Domain could score me like 2-3 glory if I do it right. The other reason I like Fearsome Fortress in Nemesis is I wanted to lean heavily into the stagger. So, we have the good upgrades, we have the good gambits, we have some pretty good attacks, but they're just all on 2 fury. So why not make sure that everyone on the board is staggered, so when I go in, I get a reroll. So not only do I have the in-faction stagger through my fighter, the mushroom dart blower, but I added the Gnarlwood tusks and like makeshift bombardment, and then give myself another attack with opportunistic reprisal. So, I really wanted to make sure that my attacks were going through. And then I put in some wonderful upgrades through Fearsome Fortress with Mason's Great Hammer. Oh, wait, it has Grievous 1. So if I have stagger, I can do some rerolls. Maybe I can remove a feature token and place a feature token to kind of line things up with stockpile or underground fortress. And then I really love the Star Maw, right? Because I have a ranged fighter that I really can only shoot once per turn, but the Star Maw now gives me a range 4 with a stagger that if I need to plink away, I can. So I can really, really turret them up. So that's kind of where I went with mid-board control, making sure that I had easy surges, but as you pointed out, like Fearsome Fortress is not the only option for him, right? So.
No, I think that they're an aggro warband primarily, so thinking tooth and claw. The only problem is that you're kind of fragile. So you're going to want to, there's a lot of really cool pushes in this deck too. So you could really leverage some of those higher damage upgrades, especially since you're not going to break them immediately because your fighters are all less than 4 wounds.
Yeah.
So there's lots of ways to put those higher damage upgrades on fighters and get them involved. I think there's also some play with Daring Delvers too. Like there's all the plink damage in there and some very easy objectives in that deck too. So,
yeah.
Jerod, did you have any thoughts on what you might?
Well, I
like to
mean,
see?
we haven't covered Illusory Might, but I think that one's viable mostly because of the attack action upgrades. They have things in their deck that require successful attacks, things in their deck that require you to take fighters out of action. And it's a 7-fighter warband. You're going to lose fighters at some point, so might as well try to make an accurate missile out of one or two of them.
And not spend any glory to give them a weapon action.
Yeah.
So that's nice.
Yeah, but I think the thing that is definitely worth noting is that the Surge pool in Illusory Might is probably the weakest, other than Deadly Depths. But
yeah, I would agree.
Deadly Depths is like Bruno.
Yeah, it doesn't.
We don't talk about it.
Right. And I mean, with Tooth and Claw, although there are definitely some cards in there that they can leverage, that Nemesis deck wants you to be in the opponent's territory. So Correct. You could double down and do that with their objectives and wants you to be in the enemy's territory. But you're going to, in my opinion, you're just going to bleed too much.
Yep.
And then Daring Delvers, you definitely could do a plink. Like Sudden Demise, we already have plink damage in the Looncourt, and then you add in that plink damage. And I think we've all seen that, Daring Delvers, I think all of us have played Daring Delvers and never really leveraged into Explorer and still been pretty successful with it. So,
yeah.
But, if you want to see my Fearsome Fortress deck, it is up on the website, and that's where I'm going to start with them.
Yep.
If you take a look at the deck as the way it stands now, it is 11-11, but that is just, for the community to understand. That is the way I start when I start with decks, is I start with 22 and I cut back from there, or I make changes from there. So,
and by 11-11, you mean 11 gambits and 11 upgrades, right?
Correct.
Yep. And just trim down from there as you find what works and doesn't work. So yeah, I think now we can transition, take a break, and then we'll come back and talk about some fearsome fortresses.
Sounds good.
And we're back, and it is a time to talk about that horrible hovel, that gruesome gatehouse, that fearsome fortress.
It's not a horrible howl.
I was trying to be clever. I gotta try every now and again. So Fearsome Fortress is the third Rivals deck coming out of the Gnarlwood season. So it is another Rivals deck that has a plot card, and the plot card has the general: if you include one or more cards in your deck that bears the Fearsome Fortress symbol, show this card to your opponent and then reveal your warband step and use these rules in the game. The rules are as follows. After the place feature token step, a player using this plot card places one available feature token within 1 hex of no one's territory, but not within a starting hex, a blocked hex, a lethal hex, or a cover hex. When they do so, they can choose which side is face up. If more than one player is using this plot card, those players roll off and the winner places a token first, followed by the player to their left, and so on. The short story is that you get to place an additional feature token, which I guess is your fortress or represents your fortress of some kind. And the reason that it lets you do this is that feature tokens that are within 1 hex of no one's territory are going to be pretty critical for scoring objectives, and are also fairly useful when it comes to some of the gambits and upgrades in this deck. So there are no fighter cards to review because there are no fighters. This is not a warband. This is a Rivals deck. So we'll kick into the normal review. Taking a look at this from the Rivals format, what are the objectives, gambits, and upgrades that you want to see earlier in the game rather than later? We'll start with the objectives as per usual. And I'm going to kick things off. So there was some debate around this one, and we may pull up an honorable mention for the card that did not make the cut. But one of the cards that we like is Bold Sortie. And so this is a surge. Score this immediately after an activation step in which a friendly fighter's charge action began on a feature token in your territory. So this will not happen initially because you cannot put feature tokens on starting hexes when you set them up. But it's easy to score if you have the push to get your fighter in the right spot. And it reminds me of Change of Tactics in that you don't even need to make an attack roll. It's a charge action, so you will, but it doesn't need to be successful. It's simply be on a feature token and then charge off of that feature token. And you could even charge off of that feature token onto another feature token, which is probably where you want to be anyway. So easy enough to score, helps get that seed glory. Jason, you want to jump in with the second one?
There's a second one?
Okay.
The second one will be Earthworks. Surge! Score this immediately after a friendly fighter is given a guard token if that fighter is on a feature token within one of no one's territory. And the no one's territory is very important. It's where you place the feature token at the beginning of the game. And everything of this Fearsome Fortress revolves around being close to no one's territory. I think you mentioned you're building your fortress, and that is the wall. This is my area. That is your area. So we're going to bring some earthworks to the center of the board. I'm going to build that wall. I'm going to go on guard. I'm going to score a glory. Yay.
Yeah, and this one's nice. It's at minimum 2 activations, but if you've got pushes in hand, it could be a single activation, and could set you up for bold sortie. So, it seems like a pretty good combo. Trace.
Yep. So the objective that I liked from this is Conquered Domain, which reads, score this in an end phase if there is a friendly fighter on a feature token within 1 hex of no one's territory. Gain 1 additional glory point for each other friendly fighter on a feature token within 1 hex of no one's territory. So this is a nifty little objective that you can score several glory off of if you have enough fighters on feature tokens within 1 hex of no one's territory. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. You want to be there anyway. You get to put a token there, so that helps.
Yep.
So yeah, it seems pretty good to me.
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Well, it also combos with one of the upgrades we'll talk about later.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wait.
Yes.
This is a deck that has cards that work together to do a thing.
Yes.
Pretty exciting. So the one card that we decided not to include, and this is embarrassing because now I can't on my phone.
Proud Castellan. And so this is a score in the end phase if your leader is on a feature token within 1 hex of no one's territory. So I think that's arguably easier to set up than bold sortie. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm assuming it's French. But you may not want your leader to be within 1 hex of no one's territory in the first end phase. So it might be one that's easier to have set up to score in the second end phase or whatever the case is. So also it's an end phase, not a surge. So it doesn't help roll that glory up in that first action phase. So objectives out of the way. Let's take a look at gambits. Let's go in reverse order. Jason. Oh, I go first?
Give us a good gambit.
Well, I think we already talked about this when I was kind of going through the Looncourt, but one of my favorite gambits in this one is makeshift bombardment. So this one is choose 1 friendly fighter on a feature token and choose 1 enemy fighter visible to that friendly fighter, and within 3 hexes of that friendly fighter, pick 1, stagger the chosen enemy fighter, or push the chosen enemy fighter 1 hex away from the chosen friendly fighter. So I like it a lot in a lot of my decks for the stagger mechanic.
Yep.
plus it, it kind of goes with opportunistic reprisal in this deck specifically, but it's also a push. So it can be a counter to open up a feature token, especially in no one's territory or within 1 hex of no one's territory for one of your friendly fighters to skitter onto.
Yep. Yeah, the push an opponent gambits are becoming more rare as this game goes on, which I think for the most part is good. It definitely leads to fewer feel bad moments, but it also makes those decks that have them that much more powerful. Trace, what else do we like?
Speaking of pushes, the other card that I like is take your positions. Choose up to 2 friendly fighters in your territory other than your leader. Push each chosen fighter 1 hex towards the nearest feature token.
Yep.
So, and it's restricted to your leader. So that's something to take note of, is that your leader has to be around to use it. But it is a nice way to get set up for, some of the objectives that we've talked about. You can push onto a feature token and then charge off for bold sortie, or you can get, have a cheeky last minute push and put on, for conquered domain or whatever. So lots of nice ways and pushing 2 fighters is a big deal. So it's really, really good for one card.
Yep. So the last gambit that we want to look at is Bound Spirit. So this is both a trap and a denizen. Reaction, play this after an enemy fighter's activation. If that fighter is adjacent to 1 or more feature tokens that are in the same hex as a friendly fighter, deal 1 damage to that enemy fighter. So, this is pretty niche. It's going to require, if somebody charged against you, it's going to require that attack to have failed. Or it's going to be something that you kind of play after the fact. Let's say, somebody charged in and then they knocked your fighter off of the hex, then you could, push back on, and you still have to be on there after they maybe activate again or something. But the big deal here is that it allows you to deal 1 damage to that fighter. And one of the things that I have noticed about the Fearsome Fortress deck is that there is not a lot of extra damage available in this deck. And so figuring out how to make the best use of the damage that is available is going to be the way to go. And I think, to go back to the gambit that you picked, Jason, with Makeshift Bombardment, a lot of what you want to do in this deck is to be on feature tokens within 1 hex of no one's territory. There's not a lot about killing or attacking, but you're still going to need to be able to do that. And so throwing stagger around is going to make sure that the attacks that you do make have better chances of success. So you can make up for the lack of additional damage by hopefully landing more hits as you go through.
And the really cool thing about, I think they mentioned about Bound Spirit, is it doesn't have to be the fighter that activated, right? So it's an enemy activation. So like let's say turn 1, activation 1, I charge in and I whiff, and now I have a fighter sit next to one of your fighters. You activate and you do something, you draw a power card. I can then play this and hit that fighter. That's like across the board doing nothing. Like nothing with the current kind of turn, because it is after an enemy's activation.
Well, so it says if that fighter is adjacent to one.
Yeah, it specifically cites that.
Here we
that
are.
Fighter.
No, it says play this ever enemy fighter's activation if that fighter is adjacent. Oh, so it has to be.
So
it has to be the fighter that ends next to you.
Yeah. Well, this is what you get for getting me after I had 1 or 2 Chardonnays in the evening.
Ooh, Chardonnays. Fancy, Jason. I like fancy, Jason. Yeah. So those are the gambits, very poorly covered because literacy
Not poorly,
is hard.
just debating.
So moving on to the upgrades. Let's start with Trace this time.
I'm going to go for an easy one.
Do it.
I like Star Maw. It's a range 4, 2 hammer, 1 damage attack with stagger on it. It's nice and simple.
Yep.
Stagger your opponents from 4 hexes away. It's a big deal, especially
Yeah.
on 2 hammers. 2 hammers
Yeah.
is nice and solid. So
Yeah.
especially for a ranged attack.
Yeah, I mean, it looks pretty good to me. And like we said before, passing out that stagger is going to be critical.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, what else we like? You're muted.
This is a great segment.
It is. So we're doing real good. So I have so much editing work to do.
You know what? There's 2, and I could go on to just different points about both, but I'm going to go with the Walking Wall because I think it is the coolest card to this deck. It's really only going to probably be played when you play this deck or use this plot card. So Walking Wall is for the purpose of cards with the Fearsome Fortress symbol. While this fighter is not on a feature token, this fighter is considered to be on a feature token, and this fighter's hex is considered to be a feature token that cannot be flipped. So you're going to get no real benefit. Like, you're not holding objective, you're not in a cover hex, you're not in snare, but in this deck, there are objectives that this becomes crucial to have.
Yeah.
We already talked about the one. So Conquer Domain. Now, if you have this, you can have a fighter anywhere in no one's territory within 1 hex of it and get another glory.
Yeah.
It really helps you score Underground Fortress, which is one of my favorite cards in this deck as well, where that's a hold 3 feature tokens, and then 2 fighters are adjacent that are holding the feature tokens.
Yep.
It's just very, very versatile. It allows you to trigger some of the other, like the gamut that we just talked about, Bound Spirits. The list just goes on and on. Like, the card is very important to what you want to do in Fearsome Fortress. And given the way that map deployment can be, it can be difficult to get more than 2 kind of in that center area. So this allows the whole deck to work no matter what the deployment is.
No. Yeah, I mean, I think just thematically, like for the deck, it's a really cool card. The fact that you're just basically carrying feature tokens with you wherever you go is really cool. All right, so the last upgrade that you want to look out for is the Mason's Great Hammer. So this is a range 1, 2 smash, 2 damage attack with cleave and crit Grievous 1. And it has a reaction after this fighter's activation. Remove a feature token from this fighter's hex, then place another available feature token in this fighter's hex. So if you want to get objectives off of the board and replace them with another available feature token, this allows you to do that. So here we go. Well, am I reading this right? So it says reaction after this fighter's activation. Remove a feature token from this fighter's hex, then place another available feature token in this fighter's hex. I don't have to make this attack action to use that reaction. Like, I could have this attack action upgrade on a fighter, have that fighter move or go on guard, and still use that reaction. Am I reading that right?
Yes, because it does not say
after this fighter's activation.
Just says activation.
Yeah, and it's not a rule under the attack profile. So like that adds a lot of flexibility into, what you can do here. You're not stuck having to make attacks to be able to get an objective token off the table and put something else on.
Yeah, I think that this card is like really important to score raw materials. Like, there are a couple other cards that will get you there. But this one, it allows you to remove something off, put one of the starting feature hexes down, which is a snare gloom hex, right?
Yeah.
So then the feature token that is available is one that could be plundered.
That's true.
So, so it allows you to then place more and can get to raw materials. So
yeah. Cool. Easy enough, other than the fact that we can't read. So with our card wishes and dreams out of the way, Next, we want to talk about boards. So I'm going to throw this into the ether.
You can throw it into the ether? I'll
see
just jump right on it.
Do it.
So
Jason loves boards.
I do love boards. And we'll get into, like, I want to play this deck with Dread Pageant. And I'm going to go way out on a limb here. And I want to go hallway. I want to, like, go long.
Really?
And yes. So unless I'm really, really on those Chardonnays tonight, when I just look at boards and I eliminate any of the hexes that matter, like starting, feature, block, whatever, just look at them. When you line them up long, there's two no one's territory, right?
Yep.
But if I'm setting boards and you're placing the first objective, I don't think there's a way for you to block where I can put one in no one's territory without you also putting one. So if my first train of thought was, okay, I'm going to move like one hex in on the center row. So if I put that there, then if you put that one there, I can then put one kind of off center in no one's territory, just on either side of the line, whether it's your territory or my territory. And then I'm going to be able to place my feature token when everything's all said and done. So I have two in there. And now I can just kind of control the center of the board, specifically with Dread Pageant, who want to control the rest of the objectives in my territory and sit there. Even with Exile Dead, which is the other deck that I made, now I can just clog the center.
Yeah, that's true.
Now it is difficult because hallway movement shenanigans are tough because you're so spread out. But I do think that in this deck, I may try hallway or even offset, because if I do no one's territory, or if I do just straight up, there's a ton of no one's territory, and I may get more feature tokens, but it kind of like funnels everything away, right?
Yeah,
like there's ways around. I can get in your backfield. I can do all these things.
Yeah, you get too spread out.
Yeah. So
interesting.
That was my take on it, especially with some other warbands that you guys were thinking of. Again, you do have to overcome a movement challenge when it comes to the hallway longboarding, but I'm going to try it.
But I think most boards have, most of the boards that you would pick have good options for getting a fighter onto that feature token that you would want. Like I'm looking at, so both the Mist Marsh Tangle and the Stricken Swamp are great for getting one or two fighters onto feature tokens within one hex of no one's territory, whether that's on your side or in the middle. I mean, I like the Chamber of Genesis. I mean, Halls of Sublimation is great because you've got, yeah.
And like
I think you might be onto something, Mr. Murray.
Again, I got to test it out, but
yeah,
if you're doing that, if you're hallway, you are the one that is choosing deployment, which means your opponent has the three objectives, right? So the other thing too is, and I used to do this when I would back in season 1 with the Sepulchral Guard. If I'm going to hallway you, I have a better chance of blocking objectives in your territory, just because there's not a lot of hexes to put stuff on. Right. So if you put one, the most likely move is you're going to put one on my side, again, out of no one's territory, just over the line, because that forces me to go into your territory.
Right.
Well, then I can go all the way, the furthest back I can go in your board to block a counter rear deployment, and then push that second hex up towards the midline. And then hopefully now you're placing your third objective into my territory, plus my second objective into my territory. I think that out of all the decks that we reviewed, when we used to talk a lot about Championship, we would always talk about board selection and how that could set you up for your games of Championship. This deck, to me, there's a lot of pregame work that needs to happen when it comes with board selection and where you're placing your feature tokens, because it is so reliant on being within 1 hex of no man's territory.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
I want to see it in action. I think it'll be cool.
Coming back.
Nice.
Glissette. Unkillable Glissette. Here she
right.
comes.
Yeah. Unkillable Glissette. She gets domed by anybody. Anybody that can do 2 damage.
I like, to be honest, like my first initial thought playing Dread Pageant with this deck, and again, if you want to check it out, it's already on the website, is to not put Glissette. If I have to put Glissette, like Glissette's role would change depending on what way the boards were orientated. Yeah. But like if I'm just fighting, I'm putting the cow up front.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm poking over the top with Vasilic, because there's also healing in the deck, right? So they can heal yourself. You can heal through these cards. I have push cards. I have plink cards.
Yeah. I'll be excited to lose against that deck. I keep smashing my head against the wall with the Sons of Elmorn.
I think that Sons of Elmorn play well with this deck, though, too.
I think they do,
We're not there yet.
No.
I've already skipped ahead to my Rivals or my Nemesis deck.
Yeah,
so.
that's okay. Trace, how do we feel about play style?
I mean, it's the quintessential hold 2. It's just hold 2 kind of in the middle, if you can. Hold as many objectives as you can, as long as they're stacked up within that 1 hex of no man's territory, and then try and leverage those hexes that you can put down. A lot of those things say feature token, they don't say objective. So that's just one thing to remember, is that you don't have to necessarily be on an objective unless you're trying to score certain cards that require maths.
Right.
So, it's fairly straightforward. It like Jason said, though, it is going to take a little bit of pre-planning to try and figure out where you want to put stuff to try and give yourself the most advantageous deployment.
Yeah. I think this is the first, really like the first deck in a long time that forces your opponent to come into you to stop you from doing what you want to do. I mean, we see that play style in Championship, but this is certainly the first Rivals deck since they started so many months ago.
Yeah. With, three decks ago, but I think I understand what you're saying.
Silent Menace was the first real Rivals deck, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got Warband decks too.
You're talking builds though, right? Like we haven't seen a super passive. The nice thing about this one is it does push activity to the center.
Yes. Yeah. It's not hold the back of your board.
Yeah.
You're not trying to tuck objectives in the back and just sit there and then put a bunch of books on yourself and then score a bunch of glory off of spells and books and crap.
Not a troll reading books in the corner somewhere.
Correct.
Yeah. So, I think, but I really like it. And to your point, Jason, I think it's very important that it pushes the play to within 1 hex of no one's territory. So, it isn't that hide in the back. If I'm playing against this, I think my plan is to either get on feature tokens within 1 hex of no one's territory. So do what I can to disrupt. The glory ceiling is not very high in this deck. And some of the stuff is a little more difficult to score. So if you can kind of block those crucial, 2 glory end phase cards, it'll go a long way towards defeating them. And then you got to be mindful of the traps that exist. So if you have them, using range 2 or 3 fighters to make your attacks to try to push your opponent off of the feature tokens, I think is going to be another piece of tech that you'll want to have in your back pocket.
I mean, just look at where you're placing feature tokens. You're not going to eliminate that whole area, but if they've set boards wide, make it so they're not maximizing all 2 of their tokens or 3 of their tokens into that little window. Like put yours just on the other side, whether you want to be in your territory or their territory. Make it so they have to really work to get, 3 lined up into within that one. So
Yep. I agree. Right. You're playing only this deck. Not mixing, and we're not Nemesis yet. Only Rivals. You have grabbed your Fearsome Fortress deck. What warband are you going to pick up, shuffle, and play with it?
Oh, wow. I didn't think of that. Caught me off guard, Trace.
Huh?
He caught me off guard.
He's not Trace. I'm Trace.
I'm saying Trace. He's caught me off guard. What are you doing? Because he's caught me off guard.
He caught me off guard too. I'm kidding. I think Stormsire does well with this warband. With this.
Oh yeah.
Why is that?
2 damage, 3 fighters. So you've got plenty of damage there to go around.
You mean Stormsire or Steelheart?
Not Stormsire. I'm sorry, Steelheart.
Steelhearts. The original.
My bad.
The OGs.
The OGs.
Yeah.
You got Oberyn and Steelheart, and then you have Angrad Brightshield, who when she inspires, she can't be pushed. If you miss an attack, she thumps you back. So there's some extra activations there with that. They do pretty good at standing on objectives too. So I think that they're pretty sturdy with those 2 shields. All you got to do is make 1 block or 1 critical on your first somebody coming into you. Yeah. So they're pretty straightforward. That would be one of my picks, but I don't want to take a bunch of them because I'm sure others have shared warbands.
Jerod, no, you would know because I got like 5, so you go.
Okay, so I'll throw out 2. I think this gives the Wormspat a good Rivals deck.
Yep.
Balanced 6 Surge.
That was my other one.
Deck. Where you're going to be missing is the kind of the plink damage to get the Inspire. But you're focused on scoring things by being in your territory or being within one of no one's territory. So you're going to draw your opponent in. So hopefully you'll be able to get 3 fighters with wound tokens and or out of action. And then the other one I like for this is actually Morgoth's Crushes, mostly because of those 5 wounds and hitting back like a truck. I think the caveat there is that you don't have all of the fun cards that let you add WOG counters and do the damage reduction and stuff that their Rivals deck does. But I think it would give an interesting play style to the Crushes that they don't really currently have. But yeah, so those are my 2 thoughts. Jason, what are your...
All right, so I mean, first off, like, this is a very playable deck with any warband, and that's like the beauty that we've seen out of these 3 Rivals decks in this new season.
Yes,
is like the decks themselves have the tools within them to score the objectives, to leverage the gambits, and then the upgrades are just the special seasoning, right? So I don't like... I want to try it with a bunch of different things. My first one that like jumped right to my mind is, okay, who wants to hold their territory, who has the bodies to do it, and who wants to keep you out of their territory? So instantly Thundrix. Like there's pretty easy surges in here, which allow me to inspire my guys. I can reach out and touch you. And once I'm set up, I'm set up. But I've already mentioned the other warband that I want to try, and I think it's cool because it'll put pressure on your opponent to make a decision, and that's a Sepulchral Guard.
Yeah.
So now most of us know when you fight Guard, you don't attack the Harvester and you don't attack the Champion. Right. But what happens when I run the Harvester and the Champion, I stand them onto feature tokens that are going to score me glory. And if you ignore them, like, I'm going to probably score a lot of the objectives. Again, if I'm hallwayed, you have to come through that entire board to get my little Gribblies.
Yeah.
Does that work? I don't know, like, because the Spoken Guard does bleed glory, but I'm going right there. And plus, this World card doesn't have a functional Rivals deck, so it allows me to play something, pick up and play and shuffle that I already have.
Yep. I like those options. That's cool. All right, new player rating for the deck. What do we think?
Silver, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's I think it. To Jason's point, it's very focused. It has all of the tools it needs.
But it does require a little more thought process to put into like how you're deploying. So that takes some practice to get used to.
Yeah.
When people disrupt you, because you have some jerk like me who just comes and plops something right in the right spot where I can block off for Jason does it. Jason does it all the time, but just being really thoughtful about your objective placement.
Yeah. I think the other thing that is going to hurt the easy playability of this deck is the aforementioned lack of damage. There's no +1 damage ploy. There's no +1 damage upgrade. So I think that's going to hurt it a little bit.
But there's a free attack in there.
I mean,
we have not seen a like ready for action style card in a long time.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
Opportunistic reprisal is reaction. Play this after an enemy fighter's attack action. If that fighter is staggered, choose one friendly fighter. The chosen fighter makes an attack action that must target the enemy fighter. That's a free attack. There's a lot of stagger in here. Yeah. You set up your fighters, or if you're shooting in the dark, Starmaw can reach out and touch almost anyone. So
that's true. That's true.
Anyway, I really like the deck. I think it's fun.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to get it on the table and play around with different warbands. Maybe Yulthari's Guardians will have their time in the sun. There's a lot of reactions.
You'll try it.
There's a heal card.
There is a heal card.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's the Rivals. Now, Jason, we can talk about Nemesis.
Oh, now we can talk about Nemesis.
So
I've already talked about so many Nemesis.
I know you have. So I'm just going to go ahead and shout out early. So in our Nemesis deck library on the website, battle-mallet.com/nemesis-decks, we have 5-6 new decks that use Fearsome Fortress. So Storm of Celestis, Wormspat, Sons of Elmore, Dread Pageant, Exile Dead, and Grinkrak's Looncourt. And so I will probably say it in the outro, but as always, we like feedback. If you have a Fearsome Fortress deck or any other Nemesis deck that you want to be added to the library, please hit us up. Anyway, so with that out of the way, Jason, we've talked about it.
Yeah, the first one was Dread Pageant, whole two. I really liked what I was able to do, leveraging the whole two and then hold the middle. I kind of give away the way I would play. I kind of flip it up. I mean, Glissette is also, not bad to get up in front. You can make her have a number of defense dice given this. So you can give her what the heck was the
there's a gambit that is
distracting orientation is going to take a dice away from you, right? And then you could be using I took it or no I didn't. Ready for anything gives me a +1 defense dice till the next activation step. So you can definitely get defensive. Like I said, they have a built-in heal, so I can take punches now when I'm making attacks back. Shared pain makes sure that I can throw damage to somebody else. And then, the other thing is I actually put Bonded Bodyguard in here. So that's a Dread Pageant card with another. After another fighter's move action, if that fighter is not adjacent to a friendly Slick Slash, push a friendly Slick Slash up to 2 hexes. After the push, that Slick Slash must be within 2 hexes of a Vassalic. And then this allows me to just suck them all in, because that move action could be an enemy's charge action and just bring everybody up for support. Now I'm in no man's territory, so I have my two main fighters up there. I just really thought it was fun. You can have Hadzu sit back and do nothing, and then come off and score bold sortie. Like, there's just a lot of flex play with them that kind of fits nicely. And at the end of the day, it's at least 17 glory that's in the deck. Once you have in Conquered Domain, that could be 18, 19. So
less kills.
That's
nice.
Yeah,
I like it.
I think it'll be fun. And then the other Rivals deck that I put together, I haven't played them a lot, in Exile Dead. And I think this one kind of triggered in the fact that Exile Dead wants to kind of be right over the enemy's line, and I can kind of double down on the denial style cards, which is, what is that, Siege Breaker, where there's no enemies in my territory.
Yeah.
And then, what do Exile Dead absolutely love? Stagger.
Because they love stagger.
They get damage, and this deck gives me that stagger gives me this stagger mechanic a lot easier. So I thought it'd be good to try. Again, one thing to note, if you do pull my deck currently off of the website, I think this is the one that I have 11 and 11, or I have 10, 11. So 10, 11, I couldn't make a final decision on the upgrades. And this also has Hardy Scout, which I don't think we talked about, which is +1 wounds. So it's now it breaks if it's a large fighter.
Yeah.
But
+1 wounds while this fighter is not in your territory. So as long as they're no man's land or no one's territory or enemy territory, they get an additional wound. Nice.
So what'd you work on, Jerod?
Yeah, so I put together Sons of Elmorn. I'm not sure if I like it or if I like the Daring Delvers deck that I put together yet. I haven't played it, so I don't know. But it just doubles down on what the Fearsome Fortress is going to do, and it allows, I think, for what is the Sons of Elmorn's natural play style, which is kind of protect your territory and counterpunch when people come in. You want to roll dice to try to fish for those crits, but it may be better to do that in your own territory than trying to scout out, unless you get super lucky with a 2 Fury attack onto the Core Chosen.
Shut your dirty mouth.
Yep.
I'm really surprised that you didn't put the cannon in here and give it to the illegitimate son so he could just shoot away.
That would have been smart. Yeah, well, there's always time for iterations.
There you go. Plus, it could give a stagger token. Like, I mean, you know the objective side better, so like I'm going to take your expert opinion on like what they're going to score better.
Right.
But when I saw this deck and I saw all the stagger and the fact that the people that are going to come to you, like, plus dice is great. You want to know what's, I think, better in this thing? I was like, I'm fishing for a crit, right? So, I'm rolling more dice, so I might get a successful attack. But, like, if I get a crit, I don't need to re-roll it. But if I don't get a crit, I get to re-roll it. So it's about the same. The odds are better to roll more dice, but a re-roll is almost just the same.
Yeah, No, that's a good shout. Well, we iterate over things. And so then the other warband, I already brought them up, is the Worm Spat. And so when you can bring in some of their O cards, then you get all of their like delicious cycle cards. So you get the +1 move, you get +1 dice on the attack, you get -1 dice from enemy attacks. And then you've got their upgrades. So you've got the Fecula / Gulgotch Vomit upgrade, which is, as everyone knows, my favorite flavor text. In the whole of the game, and nothing has unseated that yet. But I think I think that their stat blocks and some of the just the way that they work mechanically favors this anyway. So, yeah. And then Trace, what'd you put together?
I went off the wall a little bit, and jumped into a warband that we don't talk about all that much, with the Storm of Celestis.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Because as I was reading through these cards, I was like, these seem really familiar somehow. And a lot of these exist kind of in the Storm of Celestis, oddly enough. Like, for example, Ready for Anything, there's a +1 defense card, and then there's a +1 defense card in their own thing too, Stalwart Defense. So you can double down on a lot of these really, powerful ploys, and then just like Jason was saying a minute ago with the Exiled Dead, you can double dip into Denial. So you can do
Zone of Banishment,
and then also Siege Breakers as well. So those are 2 end phase glory. So if you pull both of those in your first turn and you're able to get, up in front of everybody and keep them from getting into your territory, that's 4 glory off the jump, just for not having anybody in your territory, which is awesome.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
And then for those math problem lovers out there, if you know anything about the Storm of Celestis, they have some interesting surge objectives that line up pretty well with Stockpile, which is the objectives whose numbers add up to 6 or more card for 2. It's an end phase score, because they have Balanced Strategy, which is scored immediately after an opponent's activation if your warband holds 2 and 4 objectives. 2 and 4. Now notice after an enemy's activation.
Yep.
But it's still a 2 glory surge, which is pretty nice and tasty.
Yeah.
And then the other one is Bold Claim, which you just have to hold a combination of objectives 1, 3, and 5.
Right.
So you're already trying to get to 6 for Stockpile. So now you have 2 ways to potentially, after an enemy's activation, be on those objectives, get 2. If they continue to not push you off and you are at the end of the action phase, you get 2 more. So cool stuff like that. They have a nice +1 wounds card in their warband already. There's ways that you can get knockback. I think I put Concussive Cloud in here so you can use their bow attack and knock people down with it, basically. Just to get them off of your territory, get them out of your face, stuff like that. Walking Wall is in here.
Yeah.
Lots of fun stuff.
I like it.
Yeah. I have no idea how it will play, but I want it to be good, but we'll just have to wait and see, I guess. And the Stormcast bodies are pretty sturdy. So, and when they inspire, they actually get pretty resilient. Celestis goes to 2 defense and he can't be driven back. Aphis gets to reroll a defense dice. Melisande gets to add +1 to her attack actions if she's holding an objective. So it's doing the inspire conditions are doing exactly what you want to do anyway, which is stand on stuff and do some damage. So
I like it.
Yeah, be interesting. I'm gonna try it out, see how it goes.
Sweet. Anything else? I think that's it. Cool. Well, we will take a break, and when we come back, we will close out the show. And we're back, and that will wrap this up, the 47th episode of the Battle Mallet podcast. As always, we appreciate the listens that we get, the feedback that we get. We appreciate everybody that has been joining the Discord server and striking up conversations around this new wonderful Nemesis format. If you want to follow us on social media, we are Battle Mallet Podcast on Facebook, Battle Mallet 1 on Twitter, Battle Mallet PCast on the Instagrams, and hopefully we will start posting there more regularly as we are getting out and into the world and playing more games, hopefully doing some hobbying here soon. We do want to let everyone that is local to the North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, or anybody that's just feeling super spicy and wants to travel to Columbia, South Carolina, on January 7th at that computer store, friend of the show, Brandon Huss, is hosting a Nemesis tournament. So Jason and I are planning on attending. Trace is likely not attending unless plans get shifted around a lot. But if that is something that's up your alley and you think you'll be able to make it, we would love to hear from you and for you to let us know that you'll be there.
Yeah, and if you're in Raleigh, I have car. We are driving. Just catch a ride.
Yeah,
we will be going down and coming back in the same day.
Yeah, oh yeah, it'll be tons of fun. If Jason and I end up riding together, then you can experience the 2-ounce bladder that is my bladder, and stopping every 40 minutes. So it should be a good time. I don't think there's anything out. Keep an ear out for other upcoming local events. I know that we're in conversations with some of the other local stores to the Raleigh area. They have the OP kit that TJ so kindly let us basically distribute as part of the event that was hosted at his store, the Games Workshop store here in Raleigh. So we'll be trying to set up some other events and or leagues. And Jason, we're going to kick a league off in the new year for Nemesis.
Yeah, so local Raleigh will start up at the end of January. But the fact that these two kits kind of came up to us just this past week, we have a lot of planning to do, but I can guarantee all of our local players that we will have a league starting end of January into February. And we'll probably have another event sometime in February. We have a lot of irons in the fire to make sure that we continue to support our local players, both with multiple shops and multiple ways to play.
Sweet. So I guess that's it. So for the Battle Mallet podcast, we are Loon King, Squig on a Stick, and a Mushroom Trumpet Blower.
Oh, I'm the trumpet blower.
Yeah, you are. This is Jerod signing out.
It's Trey signing out.
And I'm Jason Table New Murray. Get the hell out of here.
Peace.
Go Bills.
The Battle Mallet podcast is protected under the Creative Commons license. If you have further questions as to its use, you can find more information via links on podcast.battle-mallet.com. Music by Anno Domini Beats. Okay, we'll cut it out in post.
No,
or not. We'll leave it in and everybody will laugh. I can't read.